Huh. That's weird. This is January 27th, 2023. I mean, this is like the weirdest news release. Allegations have recently been made related to gain-of-function and directed evolution research at Pfizer, and the company would like to set the record straight. Huh. Okay, Karen. I don't get this news release. I mean, why would they come out now? This is 3 years since the pandemic's been going on. Everybody, I mean, whatever they've done fits into gain of function. Pfizer has not conducted gain of function or directed evolution research. Methinks you profess too much, but, and who are these collaborators that you're talking about? And why do you keep on mentioning the government, public health authorities? What we're doing, these studies are required by the US and global regulators. We work with the public health authorities. And this is really disturbing. Whatever we're doing is carried out by many companies and academic institutions in the US and around the world. I'm just going to say, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't make it right. This isn't where my story started. My story started maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I did more research on that vaccine. I don't know. Everybody's saying that it's fine. How they're describing it and everything. It sounds amazing. I definitely like technology, and so from that perspective, it really sounds amazing. They're saying that the mRNA, they inject it, it goes into your body, and it's going to degrade within a week. And, it's going to create the spike protein, and then it's going to degrade. So it should just trigger our immune system and then go away. And then the immune system should take over after that. I know, it makes sense because regular messenger RNA degrades within an hour. So, yeah, I can't find anything that says anything different. The one thing that kind of bothers me is I can't find, how this was developed. So there's only one mRNA vaccine out there right now, and that's for animals, and it's a rabies vaccine. That is using regular messenger RNA, and nothing special there. They inject a sequence of the virus, and so that's what they're doing. It has been around for a while. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're not going to have kids. Yeah, I agree with you. We're older. We're not going to have kids. This virus is apparently really toxic. I definitely wouldn't have this if I was going to have kids. I definitely wouldn't have this if I was younger. I mean, it's new technology. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess let's reach out to the different agencies and see if we can get the vaccine. Okay. Okay. Take care. Love you. Bye.
And research I did. Here's an example of the typical narrative that I was finding. And what they were saying is the mRNA that they're going to inject, it's going to quickly degrade within a few days. And they also stated that the spike protein, it's going to last maybe a few weeks. And what about where does the vaccine go? Well, they even had a peer review study that they said the vaccines mostly remain near the injection site. What about that other conspiracy theory that we've been hearing about? Can they change your DNA? No, they cannot change your DNA. It wasn't just science saying that these were safe. Government agencies were all saying it was safe, and every news station was saying it was safe. And then this was happening against a backdrop of January 6th. It's been 2.5 years since January 6th. And I think what surprises me is that I am still struggling to come to grips with what happened on that day. I've been trying to cope with this incredible sense of betrayal from not just our government, but from the news agencies, local law enforcement, from family and friends. At the end of it, all I knew was that I did not want to be that. I did not want to be that anti-establishment, that I'm willing to burn everything down and everybody around me down for who knows what, because who knows what they really wanted in the first place. I think that's a major trauma of this. That whole situation really started to rip back the curtain, and that whole social dilemma of what's real and what isn't real started to become such a huge conversation. And I was able to see how governments, how news agencies, how corporations were able to nurture a narrative and drive an end result that had nothing to do with the welfare of the people that they were pushing. And we're still dealing with the fallout of that period of time. The thing is, I thought things were getting better. I thought we were slowly turning our ship to the right track. And I couldn't imagine that things could get worse. Hi guys, hey, I know everybody is curious how this COVID-19 vaccination thing's going, and this is just to share information. I know that everybody has to make this decision on their own. Okay, heading into the clinic now. Okay, you have to fill out a form. And then it was over. And I had my white badge of courage. And then I did it again. And again. I was pretty proud of myself after I'd done this. And I think it was because I had thought it wasn't that I was just helping myself, but I was supporting humanity. And let's be real, the initial shot, sure, it wasn't ready for prime time, but it wasn't all bad either. So I think it was just after that that things started getting a little weird.
Yeah, we just got back. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Something went insanely sideways with my health. I don't know what the deal is, but my digestion, I couldn't eat a thing. It just went really sideways, and there was nothing I could do to make it better. And then I don't know, there's just been this weird tightness in my neck and my throat. My head just feels weird. And, and I have this shortness of breath. Just insane shortness of breath. And then my blood pressure just went spiked up. Just 3 months ago it was normal, and now it just spiked. And it feels like I'm going to have a stroke. Yeah. Yeah, I tried to get into my doctor. Get this, it is going to take them a month just to do a telemedicine appointment, because I figured, since I can't figure out right now what's going on, I need to go on blood pressure meds. It's going to take them a month to see me. Do you believe that? I know. I've been her patient for what? 8 years now? Yeah, I don't know. This has just gotten super weird. I was fine when we took off, so we left a month ago. I was fine. And then within a month, everything went super sideways. I kind of thought it was long haulers or some sort of long hauler COVID thing. But then I got back in clinic, and like 30% of my patients are experiencing the same thing. So, this can't be long haulers, because long haulers there's nobody's the same in long haulers. From when you get it to the symptoms that you have, nobody is the same. I've never been able to treat one person the same. I don't know. I mean, this week I've just been, I kind of feel like I'm on my own right now because I can't get into my doctor. And so, I kind of have to figure something out here. I'm glad I'm back in clinic because I have access to everything. I have access to all my herbs. I have access to all my tools. I have access to all the research. And I can start reaching out to some of the other people that I know that are working in this. Yeah. Yeah, this can't be long haulers. That's what I'm worried about. There's only one thing that we've all done at the same time. There's only one medical procedure that we've all done. So I'm starting to look into the research on that. It looks like, all that censorship that we've been going through for the last 3 years, it seems to be quieting down a bit. So hopefully I'm going to be able to find some of the research. If it really is that I can start finding research and finding options. But I need to find an option right now because I've got to get my blood pressure back under control. I can't wait a month. Yeah, I know. It's just gotten crazy out there. Yeah, I heard it's really hard to get into your doctor right now, but that's kind of beyond. I mean, I'm an existing patient. They have one appointment in 30 days. Oh, hey, I gotta go. The phone's ringing. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
I'm a Chinese medical provider, and I think it was my mom who got me into this medicine. When I was in high school, her breast cancer came back, and she was stage 3. She's HER2 positive. She has 2 BRCA2 mutations, and she just decided she couldn't go through the chemotherapy treatments, the radiation, and the surgeries. It was so aggressive for her. And she went out to Boston to work with an East Asian medical provider who worked with her on her diet and lifestyle. And through that, she was able to completely put her cancer in remission. So when she went back to her doctor 3 years later, she was completely in remission. And I think that really made a huge impression on me because I couldn't understand how she was able to heal herself with something as simple as foods. I mean, all the biggest and brightest minds in the world was working on a cure for cancer, and she did it with food. So for me, I wanted to learn whatever that magic was, and when I had the chance, I went back to school for Chinese medicine. Well, not being able to see my doctor for a month, that kind of left me in a bit of a predicament. And I was really nervous because I had tried quite a few different things and I wasn't getting my blood pressure down. So my confidence in myself was faltering for sure. And then all of a sudden, the words of one of the famous Chinese medical doctors came into my head. And this is from Liu Lihong. And he was talking about the Chinese medical providers in China and that they had little confidence in their profession. The instant they encountered any sort of difficulty, they would frantically resort to Western medication. I think about that because it is tough. You're in a position where you're feeling like your life's at risk. And, who wants to have that kind of responsibility, right? And so I was going to frantically resort to Western medications, and yet the door to those was closed. And maybe that's part of the universe asking me to start having more faith in myself. I don't know. Either way, I did go back to my drawing board. I went through everything and reassessed the theory, and I suddenly came up with the lungs. And you don't hear about lung pulmonary hypertension that often. With this COVID thing, you're starting to hear about it more. And I went back to that, and I went back to a formula that I used at the beginning of the pandemic. And that resolved my high blood pressure. Within about 2 weeks, my high blood pressure was back to normal. My high blood pressure was just one of the symptoms. And finding an option for that just gave me time to research the rest of the story. There was a study that was released in January 2022, right before the FDA and Pfizer were court ordered to release the documents used for their licensing. And this was going to be really the first study that indicated that maybe what we were sold wasn't the entire truth. So within this study, what they found is 60 days after being vaccinated, the vaccine-created spike protein were in the body at levels that far exceeded the levels in the body after natural COVID infection. So that didn't make any sense because the vaccine-induced spike protein was supposed to disappear from the body within a few days of injection. Normal messenger RNA would disappear within hours of being released in the body. So a question was starting to surface. Had these vaccines been modified in ways that created abnormal immune behavior? And is that why so many of us are experiencing these weird health symptoms?
I wanted to know what the government knew. And somewhere in the back of my head, I had a belief that they did know something. What if I found something? I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. I was just trying to help my clients' health and my health. Back in 2021, there was a nonprofit organization called the Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency, and they filed a Freedom of Information Act with the FDA, asking them to release all the documents used for Pfizer's biological use license. Now, they filed this 4 days after they approved that shot for kids. So for these medical professionals, that was of urgency. And the FDA and Pfizer wanted to take a lot of time in order to give the documents out to them. And so they sued the FDA to release the documents. And I think towards the end of January 2022, the court sided with this organization and required the FDA and Pfizer to release the documents in the next 30 days or so. Okay. So I knew those documents were out there. They had been out there for a little over a year when all my health symptoms came up. You know, I just didn't think I had any need to look at them yet. And I was probably wrong about that. And you know the crazy thing? I didn't think I was going to find anything. I just thought corporations were going to be corporations and do what they do. You know, distribute some sort of whitewashed, statistically manipulated, completely inaccurate story that allowed them to get what they wanted. I did believe there was a problem with vaccines. And I thought that because of all the health issues I suddenly had and the health issues that my clients were having. Remember growing up and you had a hero, somebody that you looked up to and admired, and then something happened. I don't know what, but something happened. You know, either you caught them cheating, lying, taking advantage of their position, something. And remember how let down and disillusioned you felt? Yeah, this is going to be way worse than that. Okay, so this is characterizing the immunophenotype in the spleen and lymph nodes. Okay, so this is our immune organs, and they want to identify what type of immune cells are responding. Objectives. Okay, so the objectives characterize the T and B cell responses in the spleen, lymph nodes, and blood. And they want to see if the T cell, the CD8, can kill the antigen, so that it can kill the virus. And then they're going to collect the serum. So they're going to collect the blood plasma of these mice to determine the antibody response. Okay. So now the study's separated into two parts, and it's going to characterize the vaccine candidates. Okay, so what are these vaccine candidates? So there's 4 different vaccine candidates. Background, let's see if it's in here. Okay, so they say, this is what I wanted to know. So there's a BioNTech. There are 3 different RNA platforms under development. And that is the non-modified uridine-containing messenger RNA, the nucleoside-modified messenger RNA, and the self-amplifying RNA. Okay, so they've modified something in this messenger RNA. And because the non-modified one identifies uridine, I'm guessing what they've been modifying in the next two is going to be uridine. So uridine's a protein in messenger RNA, it occurs naturally. Let me see, what is...
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. We did the BN2-162B2, which is the modified RNA with the full-length spike protein.
I wasn't expecting to find that. And I guess why I wasn't expecting to find that is because at the beginning of this whole vaccine thing, there were a lot of people who were saying that the messenger RNA had been modified, and that was completely censored. Not only was it completely censored, these people were systematically attacked and discredited, not just by the government, but by news agencies, by the corporations. There was this full throttle attack on these individuals for stating the truth. And I guess the thing is I still thought, okay, I know you guys are going to say, oh, you are so naive, but I still thought that truly the government was for the people and that their responsibility was to tell the truth. Why wouldn't they have told the truth on this? And why would they have systematically attacked and discredited these individuals so that even I fell for the social dilemma? You know, I remember during the previous administration how, you know, my friends and I, we would say, how could they have fallen for that social dilemma? And I think this part of this, that I find out that I fell for the social dilemma, that they were able to manipulate the narrative so much that I fell for it. I find that super bothersome. Hey, you, come here. Hey, come here. What you doing? What you doing? Your life's so much easier. You don't worry about these vaccine things. I don't want you drinking out of my water, okay? No, don't. Let's not share. Let's not share. Yes, let's not share. Okay, well, so now we know the press was censored. We know the scientists were censored. And this was by one of our government agencies, the FDA. I mean, how much worse could this get?
I thought I'd go out and do some research on pseudouridine because what the heck is that? And what I found is that pseudouridine, we have about 10 years of research on this, and it's been studied in mice and it's been studied in human cell lines. So there has never been any real life research on this in the body. And here's the thing. They didn't use pseudouridine. What they did is they used a different uridine. They used an N1-methyl pseudouridine modified.
Okay, so what's the concern with that N1-methyl pseudouridine modified? Well, first, it's been modified, so it's been genetically altered. Here's the second thing. You don't find that in messenger RNA. So in our body, our messenger RNA does not have N1-methyl pseudouridine in it, and it definitely does not have a genetically modified N1-methyl pseudouridine. And then there was one other thing that I wasn't aware of, is this messenger RNA that was genetically modified that they were injecting into us was also wrapped in a lipid nanoparticle envelope. And this lipid nanoparticle envelope has never been used in the human body before.
that was a lot of information for me to try and digest and to try and come to some sort of conclusion or some sort of organization with all that information. And there was an article in the International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice, and Research that had one statement that made a lot of sense to me, because they were looking at this as, hey, is there a potential that the cure is worse than the disease? And let's look at some of the possible unintended consequences of these vaccines. So let's do a little risk evaluation, right? These vaccines, they came into being through Operation Warp Speed. So really came into being really quickly. And there was a lot of information here. And one of the things that they were looking at was what kind of risk reduction was there by taking these vaccines. And I think that really shocked me, their assessment, because from an absolute risk reduction, they were saying that it was only a 1.1% for Moderna and a 0.7% for Pfizer. So that was pretty low. But the one thing that I thought was really interesting is they brought up some really interesting questions on these vaccines. And then they made this statement, that it's only through observation and looking at the data that we're going to be able to answer any of these questions. But in order to answer these questions, that is only going to be possible if there is free access to unbiased reporting of the outcomes. Something that seems unlikely given the widespread censorship of vaccine-related information because of the perceived need to declare success at all costs.
I don't know if you've even heard of the Muddy Waters Report. It was commissioned by the Senate and it took about 18 months, and they released it in April 2023. Well, the Muddy Waters Report was the Senate's version of the origins of COVID, and it's about a 300-page document. It had a lot of people who are super knowledgeable, but they were super knowledgeable about explaining a really complicated subject to someone like you and me. So if you can drag yourself through 300 pages, it's a really interesting read. One of the things they spent a lot of time talking about was that spike protein. And the spike protein, what they identified was 5 parts of the spike protein. They identified a subunit 1, a subunit 2. Between the 2 subunits, there is what they called a furin cleavage site. That's an FCS. And then there is, in subunit 1, there is an integrin, and there is also this weird amino acid sequence. And every one of those parts of that spike protein, so that's a whole spike protein, but every one of those parts is what makes that spike protein so dangerous. So subunit 1 is what attaches to your cells. Subunit 2 is what injects the virus into your cell. That furin cleavage site is this really unique piece of this really unique sequence, and it just happens to be in the exact perfect spot. It just happens to be right between subunit 1 and subunit 2. Amazing to be in the perfect spot, because if it was anywhere else, that spike protein wouldn't be near as contagious and damaging as it is. So that's one of the really unique things about this spike protein, because nature rarely goes for perfection. Nature likes diversity, and they don't like perfection. So it was really unusual to see this furin cleavage site in the exact perfect section. Now, there's an integrin in subunit 1 that lends more toxicity to the spike protein. That's what is causing the all the clotting issues. It is also the piece that also causes cancers. So that integrin that's in subunit 1 is just a unique added bonus to the spike protein. And then in that Muddy Waters report, they identified an amino acid sequence right next to the furin cleavage site in subunit 1 that was a very unique amino acid sequence. They didn't know what to make of it. And that amino acid sequence is part of what makes this so much more deadly. How it impacts our immune system is what makes that part of that spike protein so much more dangerous for us. Hey, it is hot out here today. I'm going to go down. I want to get under the shade. So let's talk a little bit more about that Muddy Waters report, okay? They talk about quite a few other things in that Muddy Waters report, and one of those is that furin cleavage site. So that furin cleavage site, it's unique to this type of coronavirus. It hasn't been found in nature in this type of coronavirus ever. So somewhere in nature, if this was to happen, there should be an animal group that has this furin cleavage site. And that furin cleavage site, there is a furin cleavage site found in different families in another family of coronavirus, just not this one. That is why the scientists at the beginning in 2020 were saying that this was a manufactured virus, because that furin cleavage site, it doesn't happen. And all the animal samples, and they took a lot of animal samples all around Wuhan, none of them showed any precursors to this coronavirus. So everything was pointing to this was manufactured. Now, the other thing that they talked about was what was going on in Wuhan at the time, especially at this facility. There's a lot of criticism about its ability to keep itself at a level 4 because, and I guess this isn't unusual. It happens here in the United States. It happens everywhere. It's very hard to keep these viruses contained. And at the time that this virus appeared in October and November of 2019, a number of the scientists from that lab came down with a unique flu. Now, all the records are gone, everything's disappeared, so it's hard to tell what that really was, right?
All of that probably leads us to what I think is the most important part of the Muddy Waters report, which is all the discussion on gain of function. Talking about gain of function is going to get you censored on YouTube because YouTube doesn't allow claims about COVID-19 vaccinations that contradict expert consensus from local health authorities or the World Health Organization. That brings me back to that Pfizer document, the press release that they had in January 27th, 2023, where they said, hey, we're not doing gain of function. The question becomes, who gets to determine what is misinformation and what isn't misinformation? Because apparently everything that has been censored from the start of this pandemic actually was true. If we go back to the Muddy Waters report, which had a whole lot of expert opinion and a whole lot of local health authorities and a whole lot of federal, our government health authorities, they talk about gain of function on page 191, and this was the gain of function definition from the National Institute of Health. The National Institute of Health said the term gain of function research describes a type of research that modifies a biological agent so that it confers new or enhanced activity to the agent. The subset of gain of function research that is anticipated to enhance the transmissibility and or virulence of a potential pandemic pathogens, which are likely to make them more dangerous to human, has been the subject of substantial scrutiny and deliberation. Such gain-of-function approaches can sometimes be justified in laboratories with appropriate biosafety and biosecurity controls to help us understand the fundamental nature of human pathogen interactions. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's from the National Institute of Health. And this highlights why I think we need to be able to talk about gain of function research, what it is, and help me better understand how this benefits humanity by creating something much more virulent that you would not find in nature, to see how the human body reacts to that. How does that benefit humanity?
Well, there was a lot more information than I was expecting to get. And I think the thing that caught me off guard was the whole thing with the National Institute of Health and their gain of function research. I have probably watched Anthony Fauci's career since the AIDS epidemic, when he boldly stood for trying to figure out a way to address this and to support humanity. So he kind of had a bit of a hero button for me. And when I ended up reading through that whole Muddy Waters report and found out that this Eco Health Alliance, they've been funding it for quite some time. In fact, there were 2 other gain of function grants that were released to The Intercept. And that's the other thing that I find really disturbing today, is all the major news stories, all the major breaks in news stories, they don't happen in your big newspapers like the Washington Post or Newsweek or CNN. The really big stories are happening in these small independent newspapers that aren't caught up in this, I don't know, this crazy machinery. So The Intercept had been suing the National Institute of Health for their grant proposals for some time under the Freedom of Information Act. And through that happened after Anthony Fauci had testified to Congress in 2021. After that testimony, The Intercept had to go to court and get the documents from the National Institute of Health. When they did that, that's when we found out that there was gain of function research happening in 2015, 2016. And I had heard blips that, hey, Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's been funding this research even when we put a moratorium on gain of function research. So under the Obama administration in 2014, they said no more gain of function research. And yet these grants were happening under Obama's administration. They were just presented differently. They just did corporate speak, say whatever you need to say. So you're not exactly lying, but you're not exactly telling the truth either. It's that hashtag half-truths. And that's basically what they did, and they got these grants approved. In 2017, under the Trump administration, gain of function research was allowed to start up again. And by 2019, science was starting to sound the alarm that there's some serious gain of function research going on that maybe we should, address. Should we do this gain of function research? And then it comes out that Anthony Fauci had sat in front of Congress and apparently had been not completely honest. The hashtag half-truths. So you can't really say that he lied, but you can't really say that he didn't. And then the reality is what you did was you changed the verbiage, so you didn't really answer with you didn't answer with an answer that tried to convey understanding. You answered with an answer that tried to convey deception. So here's one of my heroes. I thought he had been really standing up for humanity, standing up for us. He just seemed to be, I don't know, okay, I thought he was a good guy. And then I find out that, no, he's a person who started the house on fire and then came running in with a fire truck. He just didn't want you to know he started the house on fire. I guess, that was one more disillusionment. And now I have been stumbling over so much disillusionment with this that it's becoming more than disillusionment. Now it's changing how I'm looking at things. So, I'm hearing a lot about Bill Gates and his support of this gain of function development and just some other heinous things. And that really bothers me because, again, Bill Gates brought in the computers. He brought in Microsoft. He was one of our technology giants. I like technology. So for me, he was another person that I admired. And now I didn't have to go out and search and find exactly where he said these things or exactly where he was funding this stuff. Instead, I no longer needed to find complete evidence that these guys, my heroes, were anything but heroes.
This had all started with my own personal health journey and trying to figure out why my health had suddenly gone so sideways. Chinese medicine is fundamental to Taoism, and the more you study classical Chinese medicine, the more exposed you become to Taoism. So I use Taoism and its philosophy a lot to help me drive my direction in life. All of this was happening, and I found myself reading Sun Tzu, The Art of War. It made sense that I was looking at Sun Tzu, The Art of War, because this virus was born out of war. That book gave me the direction I needed when I was trying to figure out, how am I going to address this? Two of the quotes really helped me solidify how I was going to move forward. And the first one was, and this is kind of modified for the 20th century, if you understand your opponent and you know yourself, you're not going to have a problem in any battle. If you don't know your opponent, but you understand yourself, then you're going to win a battle, you're going to lose a battle. But if you don't know your opponent and you don't know yourself, you're bound to lose every battle. And then the other quote that really made sense for me right now is, if you fight with all your might, you might live. If you protect your status quo, you will die. Now it's time to start looking at the studies. And if I go back to the narrative, part of the narrative has always been that these vaccines do not modify the DNA. Way back in February of 2022, there was a study done on a protein sequence that was right next to the furin cleavage site. Remember way at the beginning of this whole conversation, you and I talked about the spike protein, and there was a sequence of amino acids right in front of the furin cleavage site. This study found the reason for that amino acid sequence. And what they found was this protein sequence, what it does is it creates something that's in our body to repair DNA, and it's called MSH3. The problem is when too much MSH3 is produced, what ends up happening is it has the exact opposite effect. It prevents the cell from repairing the DNA, and what the cell does is then if it can't repair itself, it kills the cell. So there's that part of it. Now, there was a commentary on this, and the commentary was done in October 2022, And this just kind of highlights what was going on at the time. What their conclusion said is that, hey, you guys, studies support the conclusion that the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic originated in the market and was not a product of laboratory accident. There was another study done in January of 2022, which found that the Pfizer vaccine actually modified the DNA of liver cells in human cell lines, and that they found this happened in as little as 6 hours after injection.
Wow. Just 6 months ago, I would not have believed that the vaccine could have any impact on our DNA. And yet, when I look at those two studies, the one that talks about the MSH3, I think that's happening in the vaccines, and it's also happening in the virus that's in the environment, because that protein sequence is in both of them. But when it comes to what's happening in the liver cells, well, that's a function of that messenger RNA, and I think that's really specific to the vaccines. I think the thing that's a little bit frustrating is that I have to dig so hard to find the questions so that I can look for the answers, and that every time that the questions are presented, there was a whole barrage of narrative that tried to make it appear that whatever these scientists were saying was really just nonsense. They weren't really good at their science, and they weren't detailed enough. And all that was done so that they could continue to push a narrative that please don't question the vaccines, because it's really important that we win at all costs.
In February of 2023, social media started reporting on excess deaths. And if you think about that, excess deaths are, I think they're based on a 5-year average. And if you think about the last 3 years, we've been in a pandemic. So we've had a lot of excess deaths in 3 of those 5 years. It is kind of weird that for this year, we're still showing excess deaths.
February, March, April, May, June. So it's been 4 months since these excess deaths have started to happen, and they're not slowing down. You know who's not looking into this? The government's not looking into this. The vaccine companies are not looking into it. Corporations not looking into it. Educational institutes not looking into this. But you know who is looking into this is just average people like you and me, who have skill sets and knowledge and can tear apart some of this data and help people understand what's going on. And it's through average people like you and me that we've been able to see the analysis of what is this excess deaths. And these excess deaths are cardiovascular, various types of heart disease, various types of vascular injury. And here's a really tough part about this is it's not just in the older generation, it is across the board. Everyone, every age group is experiencing excess deaths. And the higher excess deaths, the higher percentages are happening in the younger groups. So this is really something that we should be concerned about, something that governments, corporations, individuals, schools, you and I should be able to get behind and try and find an answer for this, because, you know, together we can do about anything. Yet the only people out there that are doing anything to try and understand this is average people like you and me who have no financial gain in this.
And there are a number of different ways that it does impact the heart. First, it impacts the lungs. So the lungs, whatever you can do to improve the lungs, that's pretty mission critical. And then there was a lot of research coming out. It makes more weird proteins in the body. It causes a lot of damage to the lining of the blood vessels and of the organs. So the endothelium, that skin that lines everything, And that they think happens in both the environmental COVID and the vaccine. It impacts our immune system, and it impacts our immune systems in so many weird ways. We saw with the MSH3, it impacts our immune system, but they also think that it has a tendency to kind of like paralyze our white blood cells. And I don't know if that paralysis is temporary or permanent. They just started seeing that.
I think the part that's been really disheartening for me is the amount of censorship that's still going on. Because we know now for sure that there is a problem with the cardiovascular system, and we should all be looking at how we can improve that, what we can do to help each other. And instead of doing that, I'm just going to say the establishment is still playing the same old piano, I guess, the same old song. You know, by now I found that my whole attitude towards what I'm just going to call the establishment, and I really hate that I'm using that term because that's the term that was used by Mercola, McCullough, by all these people who were saying that there was all these things wrong with the vaccine, and they were right. But in order to identify who these people were, this term came out, the establishment, and I just hated that term because it just made it sound like I was so conspiracy theory, or they were so conspiracy theory. So it was kind of a turnoff to me. And now I am using that term because how do you identify these branches of government? How do you identify these corporations or these news agencies that all seem to work together to promote their good? Because I can tell you gain of function research, this type of gain of function research where you're taking something that's already pathogenic and trying to make it so much more pathogenic, there is nothing in that for humanity. But it was very profitable, right? Insanely profitable. Okay, so I ended up taking all the science on the heart issues and the lung issues and really researching what people were doing holistically to try and improve this. You know, right now I'm doing okay. I don't know if I'm gonna come out ahead on this one or if any of us are, because apparently no one even knows what this virus was that they released into the environment. And I think it's having a much larger and broader impact on the world, on the globe, than just in humans. That's not the end of the story. That disease was born out of a world of not enough. It was born out of a world of binary thinking where either you have it or I have it, and there's never enough. Just because this disease was born out of division and separatism, I don't think that is what our future has to be. I don't think our future is going to be about persisting the past. One of the striking characteristics of this disease is the many individuals who came together to create a social infrastructure where they could collaborate and answer some of the very basic questions that are about this disease. Unlike government agencies, news agencies, or corporations, their goal wasn't to amass wealth or amass power. Their goal was about showing up for humanity. How many of you already realize that our thought process needs drastic changes? What we created worked in the past, but as the population of the planet grows, our focus on individualism and separatism, it just doesn't work anymore. It seems to me that our next evolution points to unity and inclusion. Maybe the future wants us to look past the social and capital infrastructures we've created. That's the true beauty of COVID-19, is it allows me to identify and look past my own personal biases. Many of the organizations and individuals who I admired and considered heroes have turned into villains. And that has had a profound effect on my outlook and my understanding of what's happening around me. Here's the thing, the future, it's not determined. And everything that's happened here is going to have fallout for many years to come. Yet, the reality is more and more individuals are showing up for humanity. They say that in a world of 8 billion people, they only need 75 million of us to change the trajectory of the world. All I have to do is show up.